Good afternoon. We are just beginning our ordinary section entitled Business Cycles, Technical Change, and Income Distribution. And we have here is some papers that Fernanda, Picoral, Solano will begin, right? Is the other here. That okay, and then after that, Marco González, and so the paper, the last paper will be presented by Luiz Daniel Torres González, and I will put myself by the last one, okay? Presentation. So please, Fernanda, you have the word, please.
Actually, I will make the presentation, Fernando.
Sorry?
I will make the presentation.
Are you going to make the presentation? Okay.
I will make the presentation.
Okay, do it. Okay.
Okay. I start to sharing the screen. Okay, I will.
No, it's not. Let me see. Okay, just okay. That's great.
Yes, it's working.
Yeah.
Okay. It's a joint paper. Fernanda is the first author. I and Luiz Eduardo, another co-author. The name of the paper is Goodwin Cycles in the Brazilian Regions, 2004-2018. Let's see. Okay, it's working. Oh, Goodwin cycle is a very well-known way of studying cycles in the economy. In the late few years, a lot of people are working with the Goodwin cycles. We try to look at the Goodwin cycles at the Brazilian economy, and from our acknowledgement, it was the first attempt to look at the Goodwin cycles at regional level. Okay, somebody is trying to reach me by phone here from the organization. Just a second, I answer him. Okay, Goodwin developed this model from a Marxian point of view. He was inspired on chapter 25 of volume 1 of Capital. Marx was discussing there what are the effects of income distribution and how income from the capital accumulation, and how income distribution affects capital accumulation. And Goodwin was able to develop a model that shows a non-linear relationship between an employment rate and wage share. What you do in the paper is a paper that we are still working on. We don't have a finished version yet. It's trying to look at Brazilian experience, and to look at the 5 main regions of Brazilian economy, to see if you have the Goodwin cycles in the Brazilian regions. The Goodwin model shows a conflict over income distribution. This conflict in terms of labor share, profit share, produces an endogenous cycle. The idea is simple of the model. If there is an increase in capital accumulation, the increase in capital accumulation, you rise the employment rate. The rise in employment rate expands the bargaining power of the workers. The workers are able to rise the wage share. The rise on the wage share, you reduce the profit share. The profit rate will decline. The decline of the profit rate will result in a fall in the capital accumulation. The fall in capital accumulation will decline the employment rate. The decline in employment rate reduces the bargaining power of the workers. The fall in the bargaining power of the workers will reduce the wage share. The fall in the wage share will increase the profit share and the profit rate. The rise of the profit rate will increase capital accumulation. You are back to the model. Then you have an endogenous cycle.
Sorry, Professor, but the slide's not running. It's still on the... No.
We're still on the first. Let me check. Okay. Let me see. I will try again. Okay. Now it's working, Fernanda?
Yes.
Okay, I will follow this way. Then we have that in a capitalist economy, the downturn plays a central role in keeping labor costs under control. It is an important idea from Marx in the business cycle. The downturn plays a central role in keeping the labor costs in control and keeping the profit rates. In the longer run, technical change will play this role of keeping the labor costs under control. Here we have the basic idea of the Goodwin model. You can see the Goodwin model in a graphical way. We have here an equation describing the employment rate and an equation describing the wage share. The model displays a limit cycle with an anti-clockwise movement between the employment rate and wage share. You have a kind of movement, an anti-clockwise movement between wage share and employment rate. When you rise the employment rate, the wage share increases. Rising the wage share, the profit rate will decline. The capital accumulation declines, the employment rate declines, the wage share declines. With the decline in wage share, the profit share will rise, profit rate will rise, capital accumulation will rise, employment rate rising, wage share will rise. And then you have this anti-clockwise movement, okay, that is typical of the Goodwin cycle. The empirical literature of the Goodwin model is not, a lot of people are trying to find an empirical way to represent the Goodwin model. Empirically, using econometrics, the results are not good because of this non-linear relationship between employment rate and wage share. We will try a more modest and I think better way to looking at the Goodwin cycle that will what you do is basically look at what happened graphically in the Brazilian economy and in the Brazilian regions between 2004 and 2018. Then, sorry, let me go back. Okay, here you can see the Brazilian GDP that is here, the dotted line, and the GDP in the Brazilian regions between 2004 and 2018. As you can see, there are two main recessions in Brazil, 2009 and 2015, 2016. There is a basic difference between 2009 and 2014, 2015. 2009, the cycle, the reason of the cycle was the financial crisis. 2014, 2015 are much more related to internal questions of the Brazilian economy. Now, the rate of unemployment in 2004 was the lowest since the employment rate is measured. What means that the employment rate was the highest. And then in 2004, what happened in the Brazilian economy was a typical property squeeze. The wage share increased, the property rate declined, the capital accumulation declined, the Brazilian economy entered in a crisis. Then the difference between 2009 and 2014, 2015 is that 2014 15 is a classical Goodwin cycle, and 2009 is more or less a kind of. But what is interesting, you have 5 main regions in Brazil. The Southwest, one where Luiz Fernando is right now, Rio de Janeiro. The South, where Fernanda and I are now. The North region, the Amazonian region. The Middle West, where Brasilia is located, and the Northwest, where Recife, Bahia is located, that the poorest region of Brazil are the Northwest and the North. The richest region in Brazil is the Southwest, that is very similar, the cycle. The Southwest cycle is the Brazilian cycle. The Southwest makes about half of the Brazilian GDP. The Southwest is 16%. The Northwest is about 12% to 10%. The Middle East is around 10%. The region with the lowest weight on the GDP is the North region. But you can see that we have a similar movement in the regions, in the cycle, economic cycle in the regions, and the economic cycle in Brazil as a whole. The exception is the South region. I don't know. I had some ideas about this, what the South region has an economic cycle that is different from Brazil and the other economic regions, that is relates to the weather, how weather relates to the South region. But I will skip that. Okay. How you measure the Goodwin cycles in Brazil? That's not the first step. We computed data on an employment rate and data on wage share. You computed data on employment rate using the total number of employed workers divided by labor force. The wage share, you use the employment compensation divided by the value added. You have to employ different data sets from the Brazilian Institute of Geography and Statistics, the IBGE. The next steps, we plot the Goodwin cycle. Now you just reproduce the model, the cycle, trying to see if the movement of the Brazilian economy was similar, have this the same movement that you can see here, this anti-clockwise movement. Okay, let's see what happened with the Brazilian economy. Here you have the data for the Brazilian economy on the X, we have the employment rate. On the Y-X, you have the wage share. You can see that the movement from 2004 to 2008 is constant with the Goodwin cycle. We have here an anti-clockwise movement. But interesting, 2009 and 2014, the recessions are periods in they have a change in the phase of the cycle, because 2009 was not a typical Goodwin cycle, Goodwin movement. When the Brazilian economy returned to this path in 2010, the cycle returned to regular movement. Is after 2004 that you can see there is a movement, a change in the phase of the Brazilian cycle. Okay, let's look agora to regions. The Southwest region is very similar to what happened in Brazil. You can see the Goodwin cycle, the anti-clockwise movement is very clear. Here we have 2009, 2015, you have the change in the phase of the cycle. The same happens with the Northwest. You can see the basic movement of the Goodwin cycle. The anti-clockwise movement is also present 2009, and then 2010, 2011, 2012, we have the same movement, consistent with the Goodwin cycle. The North region is a little bit different because you have a complete cycle here in between 2007 and 2013. You can see here, if you look at the GDP growth rate, it seems that the economic growth, different from other regions, the GDP growth rate is declining since 2005 to 2009. Then you have a complete Goodwin cycle. Then 2004, 2015, 2016, that follows the national, what has happened in Brazil as a whole. The South is a little bit different because, you can see that the South is GDP growth rate in the South has a pattern which is a little bit different from the Brazilian economy. You have a complete cycle from 2009 to 2016, but you can say that we also have this more global Goodwin cycle that we can see for the Brazilian economy as a whole. Then you have the Midwest region. That is a little bit different from the other regions. it was the region with the largest economic growth in Brazil during this period. Is also the region that is has a large expansion on soybean production, agricultural production. You also have here, we can say, you can see the Goodwin cycle, but to say it's not as clear as the other regions. But no, you have this anti-clockwise movement in the Middle West region. Then what we can conclude? Our results support the presence of a Goodwin cycle in Brazil and in 5 main regions between 2004 and 2018. 2009 and 2015 were years of change and the cycle phase. It was more pronounced, or you can see much better this change in 2015 than 2009. We can say that 2014, 2015, the result is basically we have a true Goodwin cycle in this moment. In 2009, the economic crisis is much more a result of the international crisis. The Goodwin cycle is much more related to what is happening in the income distribution between labor and capital within the national frontiers. And you can say from looking at the regions, the 5 regions, that the cycle movement in the regions were influenced by what happened in the Brazil as a whole and what happened in the international events. Is somewhat a little bit more difficult to say how the Goodwin cycle reflects what is happening in each region. We have to, this paper is, we're still working on the paper. We have to finish to write the first version in Portuguese. And you have to think a little bit more. If you have some ideas or some comments, they will be very welcome.
Okay, thank you so much, Adalmir. You spend less than 20 minutes, 18 minutes.
Okay.
Great. Thank you for your very interesting presentation. And we are going to discuss in the final of the section. And we can now see the next presentation that is from Marco González, Valladolid, Technological Innovation and Centralized Digital Currencies. Welcome, Marcos, and please connect your slide, please.
Thank you very much. Well, okay. Sorry, vamos. Okay, thank you very much. My research is about the technological innovation and centralized digital currencies. I just starting this research this year. I am PhD student of Mexico. The problem statement of my research is about if the future of the global financial system in the world of the Great Reset, as we know during the edition 2020 and 2021 Davos Forum, Professor Klaus Schwab, founder and executive president of the World Economic Forum, coined the term of Great Reset to point out the urgency of favoring a radical shift in finance and world economy realms to the digitalization of both productivity and financial system. So, in the search for more efficient and economic payment methods, 9 out of 10 governments are already looking through technology to issue their own digital currencies, a response of private currency like Bitcoin, Ethereum, Diem, Cardano, etc., which implies the disappearance of fiat money in cash, a cashless society. Intermediation in payment systems through third parties implies the persistence of risks as well as inconveniences in the payment system. As the Professor Wang Xing from Beihang University from Beijing says, the digital yuan is part of a revolution in the international monetary circulation system. Here comes research questions. A, what repercussion will an innovation such as CBDCs, central banking digital currencies, have for the stability of the financial economy in the central capitalist economies, but especially in the emerging ones? B, how effective will the adoption of a centralized digital currency really be in terms of inclusion, control of operations, and financial resilience? My work hypothesis is 6, to demonstrate that technological innovation applied to means of payment, especially to the issuance of sovereign currency by a central bank, could trigger different effects, such as greater regulation of the national financial sector, control of financial operations, that is another theme related with social credit system in China, tracking of suspicious operations of international organized crime, financial instability, and decrease or increase of the monetary base at convenience. My theoretical framework is are three axes. First, analysis of the theories of the technological innovation that help to understand the monetary revolution we are facing. Second, analysis of monetary theory through heterodox financial economics. Third, economic cycles. I am studying the Kondratev waves and a little part of Schumpeter. The general objective of my research is check whether CBDCs represent a revolution based on the fact that they are a techno-financial innovation of central banks that intends to distribute existing fiduciary means of payment more efficiently. Likewise, make a measurement of the financial stability or instability that may arise with them. The specific objectives are 4. The most important is this research is based on the theories of innovation from Schumpeter until Hage, etc., as well as fundamentals of heterodox financial economics with theoretical support on economic cycles that help to better understand the operation of current means of payments. Another point, relevant point, is that at a more advanced point, elements of statistical and econometric analysis. This is the chapter 3 of my thesis. An econometric analysis of monetary and macroeconomic variables will be presented to measure and compare the effects of the adoption and extension of digital payments. Innovation is an important theme from my work. The term innovation, states the historian of technology John Staudenmayer, says, seems to have originated in a tradition of economic analysis. Another thought is the foundational framework of innovation is Schumpeter. There are 11 theories produced from 1819 to the early 1980s as the basis for the theorizing of innovation. The theory flourished during the 1960s and beyond, so it is not appropriate to limit theories of innovation. The theories addressed created the basis, and the purpose is to contextualize the theories of innovation that have both internal and external explanatory conditions. The father of economics, Adam Smith, showed the close link between technological innovation, the growth of the economy, and the welfare of society. And Karl Marx granted a fundamental role to technological innovation as part of a broader panorama where a process of economic evolution is located in capitalist society, where the bourgeoisie cannot exist without constantly revolutionizing the means of production. So this society class is very important. In the 20th century, the topic of technological innovation was taken up and spread by Joseph Schumpeter, who began to formulate a more formal economic theory of technological change. He argued that progress in this field is a critical component of economic analysis. Thus, technological innovation is the seed of important change that are reflected in the production technique and in the productive organization, as well as change in routines, which most overcome created inertia and at present resistance to change. This slide is about Schumpeter, talking about the theory of economic development of 1934 and business cycles of 1939, within which we can say innovation is the outstanding fact in the economic history of capitalist society. The 5 types of combination of productive forces of 1934 became types of innovation in 1939. New good, new method of production, opening of a market, conquest of a new source of supply, a new organization. More of Schumpeter, with his innovation theory, as he called it, is actually a theory of technological change. More of technological innovation theory was Gabriel Tarde with his book Les lois de l'imitation of 1819. The heterogeneous and not the homogeneous is at the heart of the things. Another quote is, everything social is a matter of constant novelty, a matter of innovation in ideas that subsequently spread between societies. Innovation explains social transformation. Another important technological innovation is about Usher, with A History of Mechanical Invention of 1929. Usher's theory of innovation is essentially psychological. Innovation is an act of creativity and imagination or insight, and it is also a mental process of combining elements of experience into new ones. The establishment of new organic relationship between ideas or between material agents or in patterns of behavior. The CBDCs, central bank digital currencies, implies the possibility of issuing a central bank digital currency of sovereign digital currency. Let me call this important theme. It has been suggested that replacing physical banknotes with a CBDC would remove the effective lower bound on policy interest rates, permitting the central bank to implement negative policy interest rates if that were warranted by economic circumstances. Reducing the effective lower bound can be achieved through increasing the cost or feasibility of storing cash as a method of avoiding negative interest rates. Central banks could achieve this through eliminating banknotes, which would lead to greater issues in terms of financial exclusion. So we have CBDCs in current times, and the digital yuan innovations says in 2022 kicked off with a major leap forward for the digital yuan ECNG, as the beta version of the digital yuan app was officially launched for iOS and Android on Chinese app stores. Although the app has been available to some users in China for over a year under limited pilot programs, this is the first time the app is freely available for anyone to download and use in any of the selected pilot cities. The CBDC motivation, according Yao Chuan, former leader of People Bank of China Digital Currency Research, motivation of the CBDCs is to provide an alternative to WeChat Pay and Alipay. The reduction in cashless as a result of the two dominant private payment providers and the rise of the decentralized digital currencies were a wake-up call, according to Chuan. The People's Bank of China was one of the first central banks that responded to the wake-up call and took action. He went on to say that weakening of the US dollar's currency status is not necessarily the goal of the CBDC. Instead, Chuan notes that it is more important a natural evolution of the digital process and market selection. Compliance with laws and regulations, talking about digital yuan innovation. The institutional design of the digital yuan system strictly complies with regulation on the administration of the renminbi, anti-money laundering, and combating the financing of terrorism.
Marcos, 5 minutes more, okay?
Oh, sorry. I have finished. Thank you very much. Only I have to say, Condemned Project Dunbar, the development also provides that financial institution could use central bank digital currencies to transact directly with one another on a shared platform. Thank you very much.
Oh, sorry. I just I realized that my audio is not there. That's the next paper now is Luiz Daniel Torres González. The title of the paper is Real Exchange Rates and Profits Wage Ratios. So welcome, Luiz, and you can do your presentation. It's okay.
Can you see the presentation, sorry?
No, that's really, okay, that's fine.
Okay. Thank you very much for accepting the paper. This is our first presentation in this series of seminars. The presentation is about a paper Jacobo Ferrer and Adrian Martinez and I are writing. It's called Real Exchange Rates and Profit Wages Ratios, some notes on the absolute cost advantage approach. So this presentation is gonna be composed of one introduction. There we're gonna do a lot of accounting relations in terms of prices within and between economies. And then we'll go to the main points, which are the evaluation of the arguments that this theory is advancing for approximate relative prices in terms of the relative vertically integrated unit labor cost. So it's going to be one statement, the second statement, and a third statement. I will clarify each one of these in the next in the presentation, right? Okay, so presentation, introduction. What is this paper about, or what is this paper gonna be about when we finish writing it? So the real exchange rate is a relevant variable for any open economy. I will not stop any minute on this. In general, there are two approaches to study the real exchange rate, or to the determinations of the real exchange rate. The first approach is the principle of comparative cost, and the second one, the principle of absolute cost. Within the latter, the principle of absolute cost, there is a literature based on Henry Shake's developments that seek to explain the real exchange rate with the relative unit labor cost in common currency between countries. That is, they are trying to explain the behavior of real exchange rates in terms of relative unit labor cost. Now, empirically, there's a strong long-run relationship between the real exchange rate and the relative unit labor cost. For instance, this is a plot by Francisco Martinez, 2010, where you can see in the discontinuous line the real exchange rate index from Mexico and Mexican peso and US dollar. And the continuous line is the index of the real unitary labor cost. So it's a pretty good predictor of the long-term behavior. There has been a lot of evidence that this relationship holds for many countries, and so it could be argued as a style that this is a style fact in international economics. However, which are the theoretical and empirical arguments for this hypothesis, and what and its empirical evidence? Are they sound? If not, why? So the conclusion that I think we are going to reach in this paper is that the conclusions from the evaluation of the theoretical arguments is that some theoretical arguments are weak in spite of this high correlation. These arguments are weak, especially because they lack of a thorough accounting of relative prices, while other theoretical arguments are contradictory. The conclusions from the evaluation of the empirical evidence is that the empirical evidence supporting the constraints advanced by this literature are either weak or absent, or nearly absent. So this paper it will have three aims, three objectives: identify, evaluate, and contribute. The first one is to identify the set of theoretical arguments and empirical evidence put forward by this literature to support the theory that the long-run real exchange rate is mainly determined by the relative unitary labor costs. After we identify these theoretical and empirical arguments, we're going to evaluate these arguments, the theoretical arguments, and empirical evidence based on empirical evidence from the Penrose tables and the Wyatt database. Finally, in the contribution part, we're going to provide a sounder. We believe that we will end up providing a sounder basis for the study of the real exchange rate based on the principle of absolute cost advantage and the long period positions. Elements from Sheikh's model. Okay, so this is a very brief introduction about what is this model about. It's based on theoretical developments made by Sheikh in terms of the labor theory of value and its connection with international trade, his work on the determination of relative prices within an economy, and then his extension for international relative prices, and then terms of trade and real exchange rates. There is also empirical work supporting some of the arguments by Rani Antonopoulos, Paulo Ruiz Nápoles, Francisco Martinez, Fat Bundy and Ignacio Perotini, among others. In all these papers, there's a critique of the principle of comparative advantage to explain the real exchange rate. These authors advocate for the use of the comparative cost advantage principles to study the real exchange rate. This theory of the absolute cost advantage by these authors is grounded within the classical theory of prices, the labor theory of values, and the theory of real competition. There's a mix. It's not homogeneous among all the authors. Now, as a warning, in this paper, I'm not going to discuss or going to present the theory in terms of the theory of real competition. So I'm not going to talk about that. Sheikh's main point is that just like within countries, the long-run trend of the relative price of individual commodities or aggregates of baskets of commodities between countries is determined by the relative unit labor cost. So let's evaluate the argument for this. So a little bit about some accounting decompositions to express prices. Okay, so in one simple toy economy, we can decompose the price of any commodity in terms of a unit labor cost, unit profits, and unit commodity cost. Now, through a process of vertical integration in which we can trace back the value added in each stage of the value chain, we can compute all the intermediate wages and profits, and obtain the vertically integrated unit labor cost and the vertically integrated unit profits. So each price could be decomposed as the sum of vertically integrated unit labor cost and vertically integrated unit prices, okay? From this, Sheikh proposes an equation called the fundamental equation of prices, in which, as you can see, the only thing that he is doing is a change of variables. He defines the vertically integrated profits wages ratio, and you can see you can easily go from this equation to this other equation by conducting the multiplication, right? Okay, so in this case, the prices of a commodity are going to be proportional to the total labor cost, but also going to be proportional to 1 plus the vertically integrated profits wages ratio. That's why it's importance of these ratios. Now, we can express the vertically integrated profit wages ratios of any industry as a convex linear combination of all the direct profit wages ratios. I emphasize here direct because they are not the vertically integrated. Okay, so the direct is what we will observe straight from national accounting without decomposing or conducting or calculating any Leontief inverse, so we can trace back all the elements from the value chain. Okay, so we can express the vertically integrated profit wages ratio of any industry as a linear combination of each one of the direct profit wages ratios. Okay. Well, okay, so we have the fundamental equation of prices over here, and we can conduct a decomposition of 1 plus the vertically integrated profits wages ratio. So we can make it dependent on an economy-wide average and some term depending on its variability. So we can decompose 1 plus psi, uppercase psi, as a multiplication of a direct profit wages ratio of the entire economy times some average in terms of the normalized direct profit wages ratio, okay? So the important thing here is that with this information, we can express the relative price between commodity J and commodity K as this equation. Okay, the important thing to keep in mind, because there are a lot of letters and I'm not expecting that you memorize all this, is that relative prices will depend not only on the vertically integrated labor cost, but also on the vertically integrated profits wages ratios from these two commodities. Okay. Now, how we now we go to terms of trade between commodities. So let's start with a fundamental equation of relative prices over here. So this is the equation that that I stated before. When we consider the terms of trade between two commodities, the terms of trade between two commodities and two countries, the only thing that we are adding is a superscript for country A and superscript for country B. So here we can see that the relative prices between the two commodities between two countries are going to depend not only on the vertically integrated unit labor costs, but also on the vertically integrated profits wages of two commodities coming from two different countries. This is very important. Now, with this information, real exchange rate, how it is defined? For the real exchange rate, we have to determine some basket of commodities. So let's call this basket of commodities D superscript A and D superscript B, okay? So we're gonna define with uppercase P, the price index of one economy. So that is gonna be a weighted average of the prices of the exported goods. Okay, so we can express it like this using the other equations. From here, we can express then a real exchange rate as all this set of letters. But again, what I want you to keep in mind from here is that the real exchange rate will depend on the relative vertically integrated labor cost between these two nations, and also this other part from profits and wages ratios, the vertical integrated. All this process of vertical integration depends on all the wages and profits associated with the production of these commodity baskets. Okay? Now, let's evaluate the arguments put forward by this literature in order to argue that the real exchange rate is mainly approximated by this term. Okay? Statement number 1. Relative prices are well approximated by their relative vertically integrated unit labor cost between two commodities. So the first part comes from information within one economy. This is the expression I already showed you. So it is useful to present this proposition, which is kind of trivial but important. The relative price between any two commodities within an economy equal their relative vertically integrated unit labor cost if and only if industry's vertically integrated profit wages ratios are equal, irrespectively of the variation of the direct profit wages ratios. We can see this clearly. If these two are the same, then this will be equal to 1, and then relative prices will be determined by the relative vertically integrated unit labor cost. Okay, great. Why do we have this, or why would we obtain this result? There is no convincing explanation so far in our view. There's one argument which says the economy is highly interconnected, so the vertical integration reduces the variability of the vertical integrated profit wages ratios. So interconnections is the explanation of why do we have this equality. But this is problematic because we can express prices in many different and equivalent ways. Any expression, we can express prices in terms of direct industries, in terms of vertical integration, in terms of the coordinate system made by the eigenvectors of the matrix. You can compute Taylor series approximation of prices, and all of these approximations or expressions will be equivalent. There is no theory of constraints. So appealing by vertical integration cannot explain why this will be approximately equal. So I'm running out of time, so let me go forward. The other argument that is that the relative prices are driven by forces of competition, that is profit rate equalization. But at the same time, this literature advances the hypothesis that it is only the relative vertically integrated unit labor cost which provides a good and powerful approximation. So by doing this, they are removing all the elements related with the competition, because this hypothesis, which makes that relative prices are well approximated by the vertically integrated unit labor cost, is consistent with any theory of price, is consistent with many different theoretical frameworks like administrative prices, markup prices, where none of them require an equalization of profit rates. So if competition long period positions are relevant, then the full understanding of relative prices require full prices of production. What is the empirical argument for this? For this hypothesis that relative prices are well approximated by vertically integrated unit labor cost. They compare, the literature is frequently, they compare the direct and the vertical integrated profit wages ratios. But as we saw, this is not enough, because no matter what the statistical properties, the difference between the vertical integration and direct ratios, and they are not important. They're comparison, because we can express the prices in any of these two ways. In general, there is a lacuna of knowledge of the statistical characteristics of industries' profit-wages ratios within countries. So here comes our first contribution to the literature. We take the national input-output accounts from the WIRE database and compute the vertical integrated profit-wages ratios within economies. So this is just a small sample of 5 countries out of 45. Here we can see each line is the density of this variable, the vertical integrated profit-wages ratios, for 1 year. The density is a smooth, we can see that, we can think about the density as a smooth histogram. So each one of the lines corresponds to 1 year. There are 15 in each one of the countries. And it is computed taking the vertical integrated profits wages ratios for the 52 industries. So we can see in each one of the countries and years a remarkable regularity. There is a concentration of these ratios around a central value, which happens to be the mode, and there's a limited variability in the data. Now, this concentration, it is not the product of vertical integration. It is also observed from the direct profit wages ratios within the economy. Now, the other argument, terms of trade are well approximated by relative vertically integrated unit labor costs. This was our accounting decomposition. So proposition 2 is also trivial. The terms of trade between commodity J and commodity K exported by countries A and B equal their relative vertically integrated labor cost if and only if the vertically integrated profit wages ratios of commodity J in country A and commodity K in country B are the same. Okay? The argument, this for, I think,
5 minutes.
1 more minute. Yeah.
Okay.
The argument that in this literature for this approximation is that because of proposition 1, that is, because of what happens within the economy, we will observe the same thing for the terms of trade of 2 economies. So our first argument that we can put against this argument is a proposition number 3, which is proposition number 1, that is, relative prices within an economy cannot cause proposition number 2, which is the relative prices between 2 commodities that produced in different countries will be the same. Okay, and this is some others argue for for instance, says that you can also conduct a powerful approximation, but again, if relative prices are determined by competition, this powerful approximation wipes out all the elements from competition. Now, empirical evidence about this, if we take the densities of the vertical integrated profit wages ratio or the direct profit wages ratios for each one of the industries, we found very similar behavior. So this is not happening only within countries, but also between countries. So for instance, this one is for textiles and apparel. So this is the density of these ratios, but across countries. And finally, this is, I think I have to stop here because I'm running out of time. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Luis Daniel. And I will present okay. Then let me see what is, no. Just hold on. No. Just, well, it's not, I'm trying to put here. Let me have a look. Just compartilhar a tela. Oh, no, janela. Okay. Can you see the slides? No. Let me see. No. Let me see. Let me see slide, artigos. Well, I have some problem in the, oh yes, I thought that, I'll try to again. Can you see the slides?
Yes.
Can you see the slides or no? Oh, sorry.
Yes, you can see.
Okay, thank you. Okay, thank you. Good afternoon to everybody. It's a pleasure to take part of this workshop. Well, the title of the paper is Financial Subordination of Peripheral Emergent Economy, a Keynesian Structuralist Approach, that was written with two PhDs, candidates Julia Leal and Mateus Ferreira, that are under my supervision. Well, we begin to as a start point, the concept of financial subordination, as it appears with different denomination, the literature as subordinate financialization, subordinate financial integration, or simply financial subordination, that are similar concepts related to the subordinated way in which peripheral emergent economies are integrated internationally, given the procyclical and stable nature of capital flows, which generates macroeconomic stability in the periphery and reduce its policy space for domestic purpose. Well, our view is that such concepts are promising for the understanding of these emergent economies, but they are still imprecise and lack greater analytical precision, and that is the contribution that the paper seeks to face. Well, so the main two contributions of the paper. First is to develop a Keynesian structuralist approach that takes into account both monetary asymmetry and financial asymmetry, is something that I have developed in other papers. And mainly in this paper is to show that peripheral emergent economy have different degrees of international financial subordination, which depends on, first, the path of the international financial integration, and second, the type of productive structure that is, if they are more or less complex. So you have these two sorts of asymmetry, monetary and financial asymmetry, and you have productive asymmetry. Our point in the paper is that they are two sides of the same coin. Well, let me begin with the monetary and financial asymmetries. Briefly, monetary asymmetry is connected to how different currencies are positioned in the currency hierarchy with different liquidity premiums, so that the degree of liquidity of currencies determines their position in the hierarchy, and consequently their ability to perform the functions of the currency in the international level. That means means of payment, unit of account, and store of value. I will focus a bit more in the next slide about this. The other asymmetry that is somehow connected and overlap the monetary asymmetry is the financial asymmetry. This financial asymmetry is related to the asymmetric international financial integration of peripheral emergent economies, subject to the instabilities of the international liquidity cycle, determined mainly by external factors, as there is strong evidence in the empirical literature about that. This evaluates the determinants of capital flows, if they are domestic or external factors. In consequence of such asymmetries, peripheral economies have, first, to increase its interest rates to compensate low liquidity premium of their currencies. Second, to borrow in their key currencies, that is not their old currencies, is that what in the literature is known as the original sin problem. And third, the greater volatility in exchange rate of the peripheral emergent economies compared to advanced economies. These parameters show that currencies are positioned hierarchically according to the liquidity premium, so that peripheral currencies that are here in the floor have lower liquidity premium compared to the top currencies. That is, the leader is still the US dollar. And such difference between liquidity premium have to be compensated by higher returns in terms of interest differential of the emergent economies. As we can see in this figure, that is the policy rate, interest rates of a set of countries. The black is a set of advanced economies, and the red is a set of emergent economies. We can see this big difference that the interest rates in the emergent economies is much higher compared to advanced economy in 2001-2020 period. Well, let me focus now in the Latin American structuralist approach. Latin American structuralist approach is more related to the productive side of the economy, about the international trade. For instance, in the case of the private contribution, the productive asymmetry between center and periphery results in a tendency towards deterioration of the terms of the trade, so that you have this gap in terms of productivity in between center and the periphery, that is accentuated by the international trade. But what is important for our paper, there is also a financial asymmetry that reinforces the economic disparity between center and periphery, as engenders macroeconomic instability and reduce the policy space for domestic purpose of such economies. One of the most important authors of that structuralist economists that developed such approach, Latin American structuralist approach related to international financial integration is José Ocampo. According to Ocampo, while centers economies are business cycle makers, peripheral economies are business cycle takers. That is, the center has more policy autonomy and is policy making, while the periphery has less policy autonomy and is essentially policy taking. That reduction of the policy autonomy is very related to the monetary asymmetry and the financial asymmetry. Also, there is important concept of Latin American structuralism is structural heterogeneity that was first suggested by Aníbal Pinto in 1970. According to Pinto, the modern and high productivity sectors absorb a small proportion of workers in the periphery, while the rest of the economy, with lower productivity, subsistence economy, featured by low productivity sectors, absorb a large proportion of works. There is also a structural heterogeneity between central economies and the peripheral economies in terms of the difference of productivity. Structural heterogeneity is a characteristic of Latin American economies specialized in the production of commodities, still specialized in the production of commodities, while East Asian economies have a much more diversified productive structure with a higher level of productivity and sophistication. Let me focus now on some data. The first, we make use of the economic complexity index that was developed by Ricardo Hausmann and others to measure the degree of complexity of productive sector of each country. As we can see in the figure on the left, Latin America since the 90s has stagnated or even reduced for most economies the economic complexity index. The exception, as we can see, is Mexico, that is very related to the maquiladoras. But we know that maquiladoras has a very low added value for the industry, for the economy. But in general, we can see that the index is stagnated, or even for some countries, like it's more clear in case of the Venezuela, is reduced. On the other side, for the Asian economies in the same period, that is from 1998 until 2020, we can see a clear path of increase in this index that shows that they are doing a very strong structural change that results in a much more complex economy. Well, in terms of the current account balance of payments, we can see that here some Latin American countries, on the right side, some Asian economies, we can see a much more volatile behavior of Latin American economies compared to the Asian economies, as the first group of the economies, Latin America, is essentially commodity exporters, while the second one is mainly exporters of manufacturing goods and have a much more diversified export components. And also we can see that there is a trend for increasing current accounts for the Asian economies in the 90s and 2000s. As for foreign exchange reserves, also that express for somehow a more strong balance of payments of the Asian economies compared to Latin American, we can see that this ratio is much higher for the Asian economies, Malaysia, China, Thailand, South Korea, as we can see here, compared to the Latin American economies. Well, quickly, when we also from using the Hausmann and the Hidalgo database, we can see the components of the export goods in each year. We select here Argentina on the left, Brazil on the right, just to see that the export components of Argentina and Brazil are mostly composed by commodity goods. In Argentina, mostly agricultural commodities, in Brazil, natural resource and agricultural commodities. Now, when we see the case of the China and South Korea, China on the left, South Korea on the right, we can see a great diversity of exports composed mainly by manufacturing goods with a broad range of different products that include integrated circuits, office machine, cars, office machine parts, and so on. Well, now, finally, I would like to see some data about capital flows, external liability, external assets, and net financial assets of selected countries of Latin America and Asia. We select the group of Latin America, Argentina, Brazil, and Mexico, and for Asian economies, China, Malaysia, and South Korea. And we can see that Latin American, that on the left, have a high level of external liabilities, much higher level of the external liability over GDP compared to the Asian economies, as they are that show that they are much more dependent on capital inflows. Most part of capital inflows in Latin America is composed by other investment, that is the yellow one, and foreign direct investment, that is the orange. And in the case of the Asian economies, there is a clear predominance of the FDI. When we have a look in the external assets of the same group of countries, we can see that the total external assets is much higher in Asian countries in terms of the GDP, and this is due mainly to the high share of foreign reserves of this group of countries. And finally, the net financial assets, we have, that is the sum of external liability less the external assets less external liabilities, and the balance is the net financial assets. First, just to see the green line, it is Latin America on the left and Asian countries on the right, we can see that for Latin American economy, they are negative all the time, more than 20% of the GDP, while in the Asian economies, it became positive since 2002 and became more than 30% of GDP. And also, we can see that there is a clear predominance of other investment in Latin American economies, that is the yellow, while there is a clear predominance of the FDI here in the Asian economies. And of course, there is this very strong position in terms of the foreign exchange reserves. Some works can contribute to understand the relationship between financial integration and productive structure. Botta et al., for instance, provides empirical evidence of the existence of a negative correlation periods of large capital inflows in productive development measure. They use the same index, the ECI index, in emergent economies. When that no, they separate the FDI and includes only non-FDI inflows are particularly abundant, the manufacturing share tends to contract and the ECI decrease. But also Timoli and others show that the more dynamic Asian economies and Latin American economies differ to the role played by active industrial and development macroeconomic policies in the context of a general process of financial liberalization. That such policies are much more active in the case of the Asian economies. Just to conclude, we have our conclusion is that first, productive and financial asymmetry are two sides of the same coin. The overlap of this asymmetry defines the financial subordination of the emergent peripheral economy. In particular, Latin American commodity exporting countries have an economy that is not very diversified and complex, used to have a strong dependence on foreign capital and a volatile current account balance, and they are very dependent of the commodities cycle. In turn, emergent Asian economies are diversified exporter of manufacturing products with high added value, which allows them to have a strong position in their balance of payments with a current account surplus, less dependence on capital inflows, and high accumulation of foreign exchange reserves. Finally, our conclusion is that we cannot see emergent economy as a similar group of countries. There are different patterns of international financial integration and financial integration, and in our paper, we compare a group of Latin American economies with a group of Asian economies. Thank you. Well, let's now to open for some discussion. Right? If someone wants to make a question. Well, while you are thinking about some, I will do some questions. But please, if you want to do it, please do it. Just to Adalmir, I'd like to hear you about some explanation of the difference pattern of the region. It's clear in your paper that the southeast, the country pattern is very correlated to the southeast of the country, but there are very different patterns in the region, north, the south, and other. And so it would be great if you could explore some hypotheses. I know that it's a preliminary paper. I think that you have just showed the difference between this, but if you could explore some of it. And for Marcos, you developed a theoretical background more related to the Schumpeter approach, and I would wonder if the Minsky approach of the financial innovation that is very related to the problems of instability of the financial system could be interesting to be integrated in your analysis. That for the case of the digital yuan. And well, and for Luiz Daniel, I think that maybe the most important in your case is you show some strong empirical evidence that correlate a real exchange rate with the relative unit labor costs. And I would like to, if you could explore more what you consider the more important channels that explain this pattern, and also the difference between countries. You show a lot of similarity between countries, but what could be some difference of, for instance, I'm thinking about Argentina, that has a very strong labor bargain in the country that express very, very strongly in terms of inflation. That, of course, there is strong effect on the real exchange rates. So if you could explore a bit of this.
Luiz, I have two questions. One for Marcos and another for Luiz Daniel.
Okay.
Yeah, for Marcos, I'd like to in fact, to hear how he look at the cryptocurrency in when you compare to innovation on technical change related to money. And I tend to look the cryptocurrency as innovation, technical change, or technical innovation related to money itself. And you to have for example, the digital yuan, you change the way that you do political, monetary, political monetary. You change now, for example, if you have a digital yuan in your cell phone, the Central Bank of China, you can say, you will not use money to buy alcohol. Now you have to spend all your money in 6 hours. You change how you do, how the central banks do monetary policy. Okay, then I'd like to hear you about a little bit about this. I think that's the fundamental change. And I have another. I have been following the work of Luiz Daniel at ResearchGate, and I have a question for him. If he could talk how the difference in capital labor ratios can change the exchange rate between countries. If he can talk a little about this. Okay, I have to. These were my two questions.
Thank you. Can I make a question to Marcos? It's already written in the chat.
Okay, I will hear here.
That I'm just gonna rephrase it or be more specific about this question. Is you talk about a lot in your that your PhD research will be based on theories of innovation to study the central bank digital currencies, right? But I think, and I will be very interested in knowing if are you gonna consider the same theory of value money for these two types of currencies? That is, what I want to know is that, are you going to study both type of currencies with the same theory, or would you need to make an adjustment to consider the central banks, the digital currencies will, for the CBDGs, they are controlled by central banks, but in the private owned digital currencies as Bitcoin, etc., who is producing them, who is in control of them. So I think maybe you will have to consider go at a more basic level and consider the theories of money first. That's it.
Okay, we have 7 minutes, so we begin.
Aqui estão os principais resultados
Sure.
da pesquisa.
Begin with Adalmir, please.
My question it will be very quick. I think that it is related to economic structure of the regions. They have different economic structure, and also are related to different rates of economic growth between the regions. But I have to think how these questions are related to difference in the cycles.
Okay. So now I think that Marcos, please.
Yes, thank you very much. The relationship, the CBDCs and the different heterodox theories, it's about finding another different thing from neoclassical theory, and mainly from the instability hypothesis from Minsky, because our time is characterized by the instability, by the change, the petroleum, the oil is near to finish. The oil era is about to finish, and the digital progress is very, very fast, as we've seen in the last pandemic. So I consider that the heterodox theory could help me to progress my advance, which is in a start stage, but I guess in the next few years could advance to some important points to our region, Latin America, especially to my country, Mexico, which in 2024 will issue his own digital peso. And I consider, of course, the case of Brazil. Brazil is a magnificent example of advance in fintech and on CBDCs research. And China will bring us a great experience to our region, because China, with his systems, Alipay and WeChat, will help us, because it's a society with cashless, a very further stage. In China, you will find that all the citizens go to the stores and present their cell phones, and not necessarily online needs this technology. Could be offline. You could only present your card and automatically could accredit your payment. And with the smart contracts, where the Chinese government put money in your own account from the central banking, not from the commercial bank, but central bank put money in your own account. So you must go to the stores and buy the things that the Chinese government says that you must buy, not what you want. So with the smart contracts, will be unknown scenario to all the world. We will see through the next few years what will be the experience for the rest of the West world, especially to the interest our research, Latin America. So the anonymity system will be under research. So I consider important that if both CBDC and banknotes were offered, overall seigniorage might increase due to a larger quantity of money in circulation. However, there can also be increased cost to a central bank when both options are provided.
Okay, thank you, Marcos. And now, last, Luis Daniel, please.
Thank you. Maybe I was not clear because this is the first presentation of this research, but our point is to evaluate, in this paper, our point is to evaluate the arguments put forward by this literature of why real exchange rates are closely determined by the relative vertically integrated labor cost. It's an empirical fact, but the arguments are not sound, and they are not the theoretical and empirical arguments. We will argue that they are not sound. So we want to contribute to this literature, providing elements for this. The plots that we showed for different countries tries to contribute with this, to present evidence about the behavior of the profits wages ratio. Okay, now regarding the question about from Adalmir, let me share briefly the screen just to show you an equation that I couldn't present, but based on our work, we think we can conjecture that we can provide a better representation of the real exchange rate by, in addition to including the real vertical integrated unit labor cost, to include the ratios of the wage shares between the two countries. I think that with this we will provide a better understanding of the real exchange rate based on the accounting manipulation of the data, and within behind this wage share is the capital labor ratio of the economy. So I hope that in 1 or 2 months we can finish the first working paper of this paper, and I will be happy to share it through the structural development macroeconomics research group. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much for everybody for this interesting section. So we are finishing this section, and hope to see you in other occasion personally. That is better than virtually, right? And so now we are going to have to close because we are having the closing section of this workshop. Thank you so much for everybody. See you. Bye-bye.
Thank you.